Did you know that Halloween is the
highest satanic holiday of the year?
and that
The Satanists do sacrifices on this day.
Yeah, I had no idea about that either until I watched Season 1, Episode 3 of Nathan Fielder's The Rehearsal. Fielder pushed back on this assertion, pointing out that a Google search of origin of Halloween returned a Celtic tradition. Angela, the person crying Satan, wasn't convinced. And she's not alone. There are plenty of people, especially people belonging to certain religious organizations, who believe there is a connection between Satan and Halloween. And by extension, between Satan and Halloween's predecessor, the Gaelic festival Samhain. But is there any truth to this satanic interpretation of the holiday? The answer might surprise you. Leave it to a British soldier to popularize the idea that there's a connection between Samhain and Satan. In his 1786 book, A Vindication of the Ancient History of Ireland, Charles Vallancey noted the following, quote, "The Irish deity Samhain was supposed to be the judge of departed souls. At his direction, they were condemned to be punished." End quote. Vallancey also equated this Irish Samhain figure with the Zoroastrian sky god Asuman, referring to both as the Angel of Death. Now, in Islamic theology, Angel of Death is a title bestowed upon the Archangel Azrael. This same figure, or a very similar one, appears as Ezrael, the Angel of Wrath, in a New Testament apocryphal text, the Apocalypse of Peter. And while Azrael isn't Satan, I'd say he's Satan adjacent. Like, it wouldn't look good if you're this Samhain guy and someone's accusing your namesake festival of being a satanic sacrifice party, and they bring out Vallancey's book as evidence. Let's see here. Samhain, Irish deity, judge of departed souls, condemning them to be punished, the Angel of Death. Granted, the soul-judging part doesn't really fit either. In the Bible, that's God's job. Satan is presented as the tempter-in-chief, a sower of chaos and conflict on Earth. You might have assumed, like I did, that Satan ruled over hell, but in the Bible, he never actually goes there, or rather, he hasn't gotten there yet. And yes, I'm familiar with 2 Peter 2:4, that's not what that's talking about, and if you don't believe me, go ask Dan McClellan. But ultimately, none of this even matters because as far as we can tell, Vallancey's brief biography of this Samhain character is total BS. A thorough scouring of the medieval texts where the Irish myths were first recorded reveals that there is no judge of departed souls or angel of death named Samhain. Don't get me wrong, Irish mythology has plenty of death deities. Don, Billa, the Morrigan. As for a character that shares a name with the Samhain festival, you can find one in some versions of the story Cian and Enya, aka the birth of Lugh, aka Balor and the Prophecy, a story that is foundational to Irish mythology's redundantly named mythological cycle. But you might be disappointed by Samhain's role in the proceedings. Pagan author and educator Patty Wigington put it best when she wrote, quote, "Although Samhain, alternately Samhain or Mac Samhain, appears in a few versions of the story, he is a very obscure and minor character. He's a guy who lost his brother's magical cow, not the Lord of the Dead." End quote. Yeah, so in the story, the Fomorian warlord Balor of the Evil Eye disguises himself as a little red-headed boy in order to steal a cow named Glas Gavin from Cian, who is a member of Ireland's divine tribe, the Tuatha Dé Danann. Cian is having his brother Samhain watch the cow while he's away with their other brother on business, and the disguised Balor is able to convince Samhain that they're conspiring against him. Samhain runs off to investigate, Balor takes the cow, that's it. That's this guy Samhain in Irish mythology. Not an angel of death, let alone the angel of death. And while we could argue about whether or not he qualifies as a god, it's irrelevant, because he's so irrelevant. If you're looking for something or someone satanic in Irish mythology, the character Samhain just isn't a match. But that's not to say the devil isn't lurking in the details of the Samhain celebration itself. At its core, Samhain was a harvest festival and a New Year festival, marking the end of summer and beginning of winter. The ancient Gaelic/Goidelic Celtic speakers, i.e. the Gaels, originally only observed the 2 seasons. As a cross-quarter day, the festival falls approximately halfway between the autumnal equinox and the winter solstice. It was observed on the evening of October 31st and would stretch into the following day, November 1st. Although to the Gaels it was all one day because they measured their days evening to evening. Anyway, the Gaels celebrated Samhain with feasting, bonfires tended by druids, and the carving of root vegetable lanterns that could be used to transfer embers from the druidic fires to to home hearth fires. But it wasn't all fun and games. Samhain was believed to be a time when the veil between the land of the living, our world, and the land of the dead, or Celtic otherworld, could be lifted. On Samhain, people could get into the otherworld, kind of a big plot point of my new short film Samhain, shameless plug alert, and all manner of monster, ghost, and demon could get out. It was thought that leaving treats out on your doorstep could perhaps appease such supernatural visitors. Meanwhile, dressing up in a scary costume might help you blend in with the otherworldly crowd. And of course, once you've got doorsteps loaded up with treats and costumes giving people anonymity, my understanding of human nature leads me to believe that people, especially younger people, are gonna start taking those treats. And if you're a house that hasn't left out treats, oh brother, those pretend demons are going to play some tricks. That is admittedly a very concise and speculative and cutesy version of events, but I really wanted to highlight how Samhain/Halloween could have evolved without needing at its center some dark lord pulling the strings. And yet pop culture has conditioned us to believe, at least in North America, that druids are associated with dark magic, that Celtic means mystical, and that a Samhain festival must involve some sort of blood sacrifice. Meanwhile, when we look at how Samhain was portrayed in Irish mythology, in the actual stories recorded by the scribes, oh Jesus Christ. So you know how in the Yawer Gabhala Éireann, or Book of the Taking of Ireland, commonly known as the Book of Invasions, there are 6 mythical races that settle in Ireland? Well, the third race are the people of Nemed, who are famous for getting their butts kicked by a group of monstrous marauders from a neighboring island. Those neighbors are the Fomorians, or Fomorai, and every year the Fomorians demand a tax from the people of Nemed, and that tax is due on Samhain. To quote the Yawer Gabhala Éireann, the progeny of Nemed were under great oppression after his time in Ireland. 2/3 of the progeny, the wheat, and the milk of the people of Ireland had to be brought every Samhain to Ma Ketna. Wrath and sadness seized on the men of Ireland for the burden of the tax. They all went to fight against the Fomorai. End quote. To clarify, 2/3 of the progeny means 2/3 of the children who are born in that year. Yikes. But to clarify further, while this obviously isn't great, it isn't a Samhain sacrifice performed in a religious capacity. It's an annual tribute that happens to be due on Samhain. And it makes sense for an annual tribute to be due on Samhain because, as I mentioned earlier, to the people telling these stories, the Gaels, Samhain was their new year. That being said, Scottish scholar J.A. McCulloch theorizes that, quote, if the Fomorians are gods of darkness, or preferably aboriginal deities, the tribute must be explained as a dim memory of sacrifice offered at the beginning of winter when the powers of darkness and blight are in the ascendant. End quote. Viewed through this lens, the Fomorians are manifestations of the darkness and crop death that come with winter. And the implication is that early Gaels may have made sacrifices in an attempt to influence the weather and make their winters more mild, and to ensure the community remained healthy. Such blood sacrifices could have evolved into offerings of food instead, which presents us with an alternate explanation for the origin of Halloween candy. The only thing missing here is Satan. Because obviously what I've been describing here is a practice that would have been part of an ancient Celtic religion, i.e. Celtic paganism. And paganism is different from Satanism. A quick primer. Paganism refers to a broad spectrum of polytheistic religions with non-Christian or non-Abrahamic roots. Satanism, in contrast, arose as a response to or critique of the Abrahamic religions. And while it too has many branches, the common thread is that Satan is upheld as a symbol of individualism and rebellion against unjust and arbitrary authority. Some small groups and individuals take it a step further and actually venerate Satan as a deity, but the largest Satanist religions, including the Church of Satan, which was founded by Anton LaVey in 1966, are atheistic in nature. Which is to say, most Satanists don't actually worship Satan, because they don't believe he's real. And they don't believe God's real. So they're not sacrificing anything to Satan on Samhain or Halloween because that's not something they do. At least when we're talking about the big, organized satanic religions. Because obviously there could be people performing quote-unquote satanic rituals in their basements or off in the woods right now. Which brings us to how the term Satanism first came into use back in the 1560s. It was a pejorative, not surprisingly. If someone wanted to accuse someone else of engaging in a religious practice that went against their their Christian dogma, Satanism would be the charge. Bringing it back to the rehearsal, Angela could be using the terms Satanic and Satanists in that same way. Anyone who's doing something non-Christian in her eyes is a Satanist. But I don't know. I get the sense she thinks there are people out in the woods right now making covenants with a literal, physical Satan, which is a very 17th century mindset, something I explore in more detail in my video on the film The Witch, available over on my Folklore and Film channel. Now, to play devil's advocate, there is a workaround here if we want to prove Samhain has a satanic origin. We just need to say Satan was actually behind all of that Iron Age Gaelic pagan stuff the whole time. The great deceiver hath deceiveth them. Those druidic Samhain bonfires, actually the fires of hell. Place Satan has never been, incidentally. As for modern paganism, just look at who many neo-pagans are worshipping these days. A triple goddess and a horned god. That's your devil in disguise right there. And everyone knows that the horned god Cernunnos is Celtic, which is true-ish. Cernunnos could better be described as a Gaulish or Gallo-Roman deity. He was variously understood to be a god of fertility, nature, and perhaps most pertinently, the underworld. This sounds promising from an, oh, this dude is actually Satan perspective, until we remember Satan doesn't rule an underworld. But those horns! Is it a coincidence that the devil is often depicted with horns, and that the Gauls have the horned Cernunnos, and the Greeks have the horned Pan, and the Hindus have the horned Pashupati? Clearly, this is some kind of ancient devil worship cult conspiracy, right? 3 things. First, I think it's actually pretty likely we'd get man with animal horns iconography popping up independently. The earliest example was created some 14,000 years ago, so as a motif, it predates every civilization ever. Second, if your team know there must be a shared mythological origin between Cernunnos and Pan and Pashupati, that's also entirely feasible since the Gaulish, Greek, and Hindi languages all have a common linguistic progenitor. Proto-Indo-European. So certain aspects of a shared Proto-Indo-European religion/mythology likely persisted into Gaulish, Greek, Hindu, and other traditions. Third, Satan didn't start getting depicted with horns until the Middle Ages. I probably should have led with that one. And artists modeled their depictions of Satan after depictions of Pan. To quote scholar Jeffrey Burton Russell, the iconographic influence of Pan upon the devil is enormous, end quote. I also want to reiterate the point that Cernunnos, the famed Celtic horned god, isn't Irish or Gaelic. And while the Gaulish Celtic speakers and Gaelic Celtic speakers do appear to have some deities in common, Lugh and Lugh, for example, there is no direct horned god equivalent in the Irish pantheon. Believe me, I looked. The closest I could find is the Dagda, the father of the Irish gods, who, on one occasion, jokingly refers to himself as the Horned Man. Not because he has antlers sprouting from his head, mind you, but because he's, in the mood. Speaking of which, I'd be remiss not to mention that the Dagda famously knocks boots with the Morrigan, goddess of battle, fate, and territorial sovereignty, on Samhain, or more specifically, quote, near the All Hallows of the battle. End quote. The battle in question being the Second Battle of Matura, which saw the Tuatha Dé Danann finally put an end to Ireland's Fomorian foes. And while this single mention of a single instance of intimacy between the Dagda and the Morrigan may not seem like much on its surface, there might be a deeper meaning. To quote archaeologist Barry Cunliffe, the Dagda engaged in intercourse with the Morrigan once a year on the Feast of Samhain, thus commanding her protection for his people for the year to come. End quote. Now that's a Samhain sacrifice. Still doesn't feel very satanic though, does it? If only Irish mythology had a figure like the Norse trickster god Loki, you know? Famed not only for his horns, but for his ability to tempt and manipulate people. What's more, as the son of a Jotun, Loki is the descendant of an ostensibly evil, dare I say, demonic race. And of course, if you've seen my video comparing the Norse and Irish pantheons, you know where I'm going with this. The Norse Loki has a potential Irish cognate, the aforementioned Lugh. Lugh is the god of many talents. He's persuasive, a smooth talker. As a mere boy, he strolls into Tara, seat of Ireland's High King, Nuada of the Silver Hand, and impresses him so much, Nuada puts him in charge. The event, known as the Coming of Lugh, famously occurs on Samhain. After years of preparation, Lugh then leads the Tuatha Dé Danann into battle against their oppressors, the Fomorians. This battle, the aforementioned Second Battle of Matura, also occurs on Samhain. Oh, and get this. Just as Loki is part Jotun, Lugh is part Fomorian. Lugh is actually the grandson of the greatest Fomorian warrior, Balor of the Evil Eye, who can incinerate entire countrysides with a glance. Grandpa. Or he could do that until Lugh launched a projectile into Grandpa's evil eye, killing him. Lugh Lucifer? Yeah, there's also the name thing. Lucifer, of course, is the name of the fallen angel who later becomes conflated with Satan in Christian tradition. A literal translation of the name Lucifer is light bringer or light bringing. And the first part of that name, the light part, ultimately stems back to the Proto-Indo-European root, Lugh, meaning light or shine. And lo and behold, one popular etymology of the Irish name Lugh is that it derives from the same Proto-Indo-European root Lugh, meaning light or shine. This etymology makes sense if you're familiar with how the Fomorians describe Lugh in the Irish myth, The Fate of the Children of Turin. And I quote, "It is then Bress, son of Elachan, rose up and said, 'It is a wonder to me the sun to be rising in the west today, and it rising in the east every other day. It would be better for us it to be the sun,' said the Druids. 'What else is it?' said he. 'It is the shining of the face of Lugh.'" End quote. So yeah, Lugh and Lucifer, both a couple of shiny boys. And while Lugh is clearly associated with Samhain, he actually already has his own cross-quarter day, or at least one that bears his name, Lugh Nasa. It's on the 1st of August, falling between the summer solstice and the autumnal equinox. And like Samhain, it's a harvest festival, a first fruits celebration to be specific. And it's theorized that this festival would have essentially lasted the entire harvest, ending with a big shebang on Samhain. So the idea that Lugh is the god reigning over that part of the year could work. And the big shebang I just mentioned is Lugh killing Balor, extinguishing his fiery eye. Remember earlier when I talked about the Gaels using root vegetable lanterns, i.e. jack-o'-lanterns, to carry embers? The reason they did that is because on Samhain, everyone would extinguish their home hearth fires. Then the communal druidic fire would be lit, marking the beginning of the new year. So maybe the extinguishing of those hearth fires is the symbolic killing of Balor, which means on Samhain, the Gaels were celebrating Lugh's triumph over his people's oppressors. And thus, on Halloween, we are essentially commemorating a pagan Irish god with mythological and etymological ties to Lucifer, aka Satan. Someone call Nathan Fielder. Angela was right. And if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, and one of the best things you can do is subscribe. That really helps. Check out my book, Samhain in Your Pocket, if you want to learn more. As always, my name is I.E. Neverday, editor of the Celtic fantasy short story anthology Neon Druid, and creator of the Irish Myths and Folklore and Film YouTube channels. Thanks for coming out.